of a gullible child. I did and believed almost anything anyone ever told me. But then again, that can be said about most children. They really do believe anything you tell them. But I think that's just part of the learning process. What you tell children is what they learn and what they believe. And it's similar with books and movies too. For me, I always loved fairy tales. These types of stories, introducing many others, and myself, to the common life morals of bravery, love and fear, good versus evil. But it's these types of tales in particular that begin to teach children about the concept of justice and the consequences of being evil. For example, Peter Pan and Captain Hook taught me that if you're a big old bad pirate that wants to murder little boys, well, you're probably going to get your hands chopped off by a crocodile, twice. Hansel and Gretel taught me that if you're a big old witch that wants to hold little children hostage in your gingerbread house so you can cook them later, well, you're probably going to be shoved into an oven and you're probably going to die. Little Red Riding Hood taught me that if you're a big bad wolf that wants to prey on and eat little girls, well, there's probably going to be a wood chopper come along at some point, and he's going to take his axe and he's going to chop you in half from the top down, and you're probably going to die. And it's going to be great. And Snow White taught me that if you're going to pose as someone else to manipulate and murder poor Snow White, well, there's probably going to be some dwarves chase you up a hill. And these dwarves are going to make you fall off a cliff onto jagged rocks, and you're probably going to die. And it's going to be fantastic. Justice served. However, as I began to grow up, I realized that it would be pretty hard to shove someone in an oven, and I still saw a lot of the bad guys on the news with their hands still attached. And so, along with reality and the unavoidable concept of growing up, I was taught a lot of things that weren't true about fairy tales. And what happened to the bad guys in real life was completely different. Welcome to prison. A place where criminals are kept and punished, a place where the big bad wolves and the murderous witches are made to suffer, a place where justice is served and repayment is made. Or so I thought. At the time, however, as a young girl, I was happy with this jail place, happy with the fact that the nasty people were being locked up forever in a horrible place. At this time, I did know about the horrible crimes we were committing, kidnappings, murders, burglaries, and it scared me. Then I saw your usual prison. Now this is an example of a typical jail cell nestled within the walls of an Australian correctional centre. It's minimal, but it's clean. It's livable, not too bad, especially considering the much harsher conditions that millions of innocent people around the globe go through every day, such as children in refugee camps, or hopeless families and workers struggling in slums. In comparison, this jail cell's paradise. I was seeing as a little girl that a guilty offender could be given paradise. And here we have a social area for inmates to spend downtime at Long Bay Correctional Centre, a much more pleasant area than a rubbish-ridden, broken tarmac road in an overpopulated area in India. And here we have Casuarina Prison, with a table tennis table for fun and fresh green grass where the inmates can get to savour a view of the sky, despite this prison being titled Australia's hardest prison. None of these resembled that much of a horrible place to me. However, I did believe that these real-life evil villains would have to spend the rest of their lives in there with no access to the rest of us as an innocent public. I believed that these people would never be free to kill again, and that if they were eventually released, they would be old and weak, and they would be so fearful of prison that they would refrain from committing any more crimes. Then I learned about the criminal justice system and its sentences, and was soon finally enlightened about the true and uncomforting justice system controlling the real world. Well, welcome to the courts of Australia. To the top, we have the Western Australian Supreme Court. To your left, the Melbourne County Court, and to your right, the Melbourne Magistrates Court. All built with the same common aim, to serve justice. Now it's here in these courts that people that have been accused of crimes are taken and put on trial, to determine whether they are guilty or innocent. And the process goes like this. An accused offender will make an initial appearance in court and will then attend what's called a preliminary hearing that will determine whether they are innocent or guilty, given bail or detention. And it is in a courtroom like this one that the accused person will be put on trial, determining their punishment and jail sentence if they are found guilty. Now, the process is a lot longer and more complicated than that which I explained, with judges, a jury, documents, and lots of time. However, regardless of the process being simplified or not, the aim remains the same: to serve justice. Now, the court system has the power to dictate the length of a sentence given to an offender. Maybe someone is brought in accused of armed robbery. The courts and the laws might dictate that this person is deserving of 3 years jail time. Or someone is brought in accused of drug trafficking. The courts might decide that this person deserves 17 years jail time. It's up to the courts and the laws. But whatever the sentence is, the court's job is to lock up the offenders for a fair and just amount of time. Let's take a look at an example. Stephen James Hunter, now 47 years old, is a man who throughout his life has been heavily involved with the criminal justice system. In 1986, Hunter stabbed to death an 18-year-old girl named Jackie Matthews after she had rejected his sexual advances. A choice that she had the right to make had cost her her life, cost her family the burden of having to go on without her, all because of this one man. He then had attempted to cover up the murder by burning her body, leaving her loved ones with nothing. Now, you would assume that a life sentence would be given here, wouldn't you? A murderer deserves a life sentence. His was only 16 years in prison with a minimum of 13. Then, in 2000, after only serving his minimum term, which was 13 years, he was released on a system called parole. This is the conditional release of a prisoner into society before the end of their maximum sentence. This means that offenders can return to an almost normal life, except they are checked on regularly through means such as phone calls. Also, this decision is made by a parole board to take into account all aspects of the crime committed, to declare if the criminal is eligible for parole. And so, Hunter was free to roam the streets and live his own life, just 13 years after taking away someone else's. In 2002, he then kidnapped and tortured a man and was sentenced to only 4 years in prison. Again, he was released on parole. In 2012, just last year, his parole ended, and 9 days after, he brutally murdered this girl, Sarah Kafferty. Only a few years older than us, she was hit on the head by a blunt object and stabbed 20 times, all of which she would have fell. Hunter then dumped her in a wheelie bin and covered her body in wet cement. Her remains could never be properly recovered. Her mother has made several appearances to raise awareness of the sheer devastation that this single man in the criminal justice system has caused her and everyone around her.
Here, in my heart, I have Sarah's ashes. She's with me all the time. That's all I have. Some ashes. It's a beautiful, bubbly girl who had the most beautiful, sparkling eyes, the most infectious smile. He took all that away.
Where was justice that day? The death of Sarah Kafferty can be blamed upon two major faults within the criminal justice system: the lengths of the jail sentences and the system of parole. Stephen James Hunter served only 13 years of his life in prison, after taking away an average of 66 years off of Jackie Matthews' life, the woman he murdered prior to killing Sarah Kafferty. That to me is not just. The system of parole is the temporary or permanent release of a prisoner before the expiry date of a sentence, on the promise of good behaviour. Its aim is to provide an offender with a much smoother transition into the community to reduce his or her chances of wanting to re-offend. It aims to protect us. However, parole allowed Stephen James Hunter back onto the streets to perform more acts of terror, resulting in a death and a kidnapping. Parole didn't work here, and it doesn't seem to be anywhere else. Adrian Bailey, the man pictured here on your left, had a very large and very shocking criminal record prior to his murder and rape of Melbourne woman Jill Marr, to your right. Bailey began his soon-to-be long criminal record in 1990 when he held a teenage girl hostage in his home and attempted to rape her. He was arrested, charged, but granted bail. He targeted another girl again in the same year, was arrested, charged, but granted bail again. In 2001, he was arrested and charged with several rapes, but only served 11, and was then put on parole. On average, Adrian Bailey raped over 20 women. Now, the average jail sentence for raping someone in New South Wales is 25 years. So Adrian Bailey should have served an average of 500 years in prison. He served 11. He kept re-offending, kept tearing apart the lives of others, and was given next to nothing in punishment. In July 2012, just last year, he raped and murdered Melbourne woman Jill Marr while she was walking home from a night out with friends, while he was on parole. She was a life so viciously torn from us by a man spared by the criminal justice system. Remember parole's aim, though? To serve justice? In 1990, 17-year-old Vanessa Hosen had a man named Terence John Leary climb into her bedroom via her window, sexually assault her, and then finally end her terror by brutally murdering her. This girl, similar to our age, was hit on the head 10 times by a hammer and had her body dumped in a car park. Leary was then sentenced to 24 years in prison, but of course didn't serve the full time, and was granted parole just this year. In June, this murderer attempted to rape a 30-year-old woman at a bus stop. He then proceeded to stab her and punctured her lung. This was here in Australia, in a community just like ours. Was the parole board protecting this woman? And is it fulfilling its aim? These are the achievements of parole, and these are the achievements of the criminal justice system. Is it justice, though? Is justice allowing murderers and rapists to roam free after only serving 10 or 20 years in prison, only to offend once again? If this is what the system believes, then I think that the definition of justice has changed. Why isn't the natural life sentence given to those that rip away the lives of others? Where is this equality that this modern world strives for? Is roaming free as a criminal equal to dying as an innocent? Families like Sarah Caprica's are spending large sums of money on lawyers to fight for the sentences that should be given, but aren't, and never are. They are most simply paying for injustice. Thousands of dollars for injustice. People's loved ones are now slaves to death. We are slaves of the system, yet the criminals are slaves to no one. They are spared. The criminal justice system is becoming our enemy, and we cannot fight these violent offenders that pose a threat to us and everyone around us, when the system that is meant to protect us is going against us. I think we have more than one form of battle to take part in. Welcome to the criminal injustice system.